There are moments in life that change everything in an instant. Moments that rip the veil off your reality and leave you staring into an abyss you never knew existed. I never imagined such a moment would arrive for me. But then again, who does? For 10 years, I lived in a marriage that seemed, on the surface, unbreakable. But the foundations had long since begun to rot. I just couldn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. My name is Michael. I'm a civil engineer by trade, the kind of guy who always took pride in building things, bridges, roads, sometimes even entire communities. But when it came to my own life, my own marriage, I was blind to the cracks that had been forming for years. It wasn't always like that. When I first met Sarah, it was like someone flipped a switch inside me. She was vibrant, intelligent, and had this way of making everyone around her feel like they mattered. It wasn't just her beauty that captivated me. It was her spirit, her energy. I was drawn to her like a moth to a flame. Sarah worked as a marketing director for a mid-sized firm in the city. She was good at her job. Better than good, actually. Her ability to connect with people, to make them feel important, was what made her so effective. It was also what made her so dangerous. I just didn't know it then. In the early years, we were happy. At least I thought we were. We bought a house, a modest place on the outskirts of town, not too big but cozy. We talked about kids, about our future together. But the kids never came. We tried, but after a few years of disappointments, we quietly stopped talking about it. It was an unspoken agreement. We had each other, and that was supposed to be enough. Looking back, maybe that was where the first crack appeared. I buried myself in my work, taking on more projects than I could handle. I convinced myself it was for us, for our future. Sarah did the same, throwing herself into her career with a fervor that bordered on obsession. We saw less and less of each other, but when we did, it was always the same. We were cordial, polite, like two strangers sharing the same space. It wasn't that we fought, at least not at first. We were too good at pretending everything was fine. But the distance between us grew, slowly at first, then more rapidly. She started working late more often. Business trips became more frequent. I told myself it was normal, that every couple goes through these phases. But deep down, I knew something was off. There were little things that didn't add up, like the way she'd suddenly hang up the phone when I walked into the room, or the texts she never seemed to answer when I was around. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't remember the last time we'd been truly intimate. Not just physically, but emotionally. There was a coldness between us that I couldn't shake. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it was just a rough patch, but the doubt gnawed at me like a hungry wolf. Then there were the friends. Sarah had a tight-knit group of friends she'd known for years. They were all successful, independent women, each with their own lives, their own dramas. I liked them well enough, but I never really fit in with them. I was the quiet one, the guy who didn't quite get the in-jokes or the endless gossip. But there was one friend in particular who always seemed a little too interested in what was going on between Sarah and me, Emily. Emily was a firecracker. Short, with a pixie cut and a mouth that never stopped. She was the life of the party, always ready with a joke or a cutting remark. But there was something about her that set my teeth on edge. She was too familiar, too comfortable in our space. I'd catch her looking at me sometimes, with this strange intensity, like she was trying to see right through me. I chalked it up to paranoia, but the feeling lingered. And then there was the night it all came to a head. It was a Friday, and I was home early for once. Sarah had told me she'd be late, something about a client dinner that couldn't be rescheduled. I didn't think much of it until I noticed her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. She'd forgotten it, something she never did. Without thinking, I picked it up, intending to call her and let her know. But then a message popped up on the screen, and I froze. "Can't wait to see you tonight." There was no name attached, just a number. My heart started pounding, the blood roaring in my ears. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at that message. 100 thoughts raced through my mind, none of them good. When the doorbell rang, it startled me so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I set it down carefully, like it was a bomb that might go off at any second, and went to answer the door. Standing there was Emily, her usual grin plastered on her face, but there was something different in her eyes, something I hadn't seen before, something predatory. She pushed past me into the house, without waiting for an invitation, like she owned the place. "I've been waiting 10 years for her to die so I can finally get you," she said, her voice dripping with something dark and twisted. For a moment, I didn't understand what she was saying. I just stared at her, my mind reeling. Then it hit me like a freight train. She was talking about Sarah, my wife, and the way she said it, like it was some sick joke, made my blood run cold. "What the hell are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice rising with anger and confusion. Emily didn't back down. If anything, her smile widened, her eyes gleaming with a mix of satisfaction and something else, something that made me want to lash out, to make her shut up before she said something I couldn't handle. "I've been waiting," she repeated, stepping closer, waiting for her to slip up, for her to make a mistake. And now that she has, you're all mine. Rage exploded inside me like a volcano. I grabbed her by the throat, shoving her against the wall, my hands trembling with the effort it took to hold myself back from doing something I'd regret. "I'm going to let you go now," I hissed through clenched teeth. "And you'll have exactly 1 minute to get out of my house, or I'll throw you out of the window from the 7th floor. But if I find out that you were somehow involved in her death, I swear I will make you suffer for eternity." Emily's grin faltered for just a second, fear flickering in her eyes. But then she laughed, a low, bitter sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Oh, Michael," she whispered, her voice laced with mockery. "You have no idea what's really going on." I let go of her, shoving her towards the door. "Get out!" I barked, my voice barely controlled. She hesitated for a split second before she turned and walked out, her laughter echoing down the hallway as she disappeared into the night. I slammed the door behind her, my heart racing, my mind a storm of fury and confusion. What the hell had just happened? What did she mean? What's really going on? And what did any of this have to do with Sarah? As I stood there, trying to make sense of the madness that had just unfolded, a sinking feeling settled in my gut. Emily knew something. Something about Sarah, something that I had been too blind to see. And now, whatever it was coming for me like a freight train, unstoppable and deadly. But I wasn't going to stand by and let it destroy me. Not without a fight. Sarah and I married after a whirlwind romance. She worked as a graphic designer, and she had this incredible ability to turn the mundane into something beautiful. Our life together was like a well-curated portfolio, everything in its place, each element complementing the other. We had our routines, our inside jokes, and our mutual respect. People often told us we were the perfect couple. For a long time, I believed that too. But life has a way of testing the things you think are solid. The first sign that something was wrong came about 5 years into our marriage. It was subtle. So subtle, in fact, that I dismissed it at first. Sarah started working late more often, and when I asked her about it, she'd smile and say she was trying to get ahead of deadlines. I didn't think much of it. We both had demanding careers, and I knew what it was like to be buried in work. Still, there were other things. She was more distant, less interested in the little rituals we used to share. We used to have coffee together every morning before I left for the office, talking about our plans for the day or just enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. But gradually, those moments became less frequent. She would be up and gone before I even made it to the kitchen, leaving behind a lukewarm pot of coffee and a note about how she had an early start. Then there were the phone calls. She started receiving more of them, often stepping out of the room to take them in private. When I asked who it was, she'd brush it off. Just work, or a friend who needed advice. but something in her voice didn't sit right with me. It was lighter, almost nervous. I noticed she started carrying her phone everywhere, even into the bathroom, which was something she never used to do. It was small, these changes, but they gnawed at me. Still, I trusted her. After all, she was my wife, and I had no reason to suspect anything out of the ordinary. It wasn't until one night when she came home well after midnight, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine, that the first real crack appeared in the facade. I asked her where she had been, and she gave me a vague story about drinks with colleagues after a long meeting. I tried to believe her, I really did. But something in her eyes looked different. It was as if she was looking at me from a distance, as if a wall had gone up between us. I didn't push her on it that night. Instead, I let it slide, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. But deep down, the doubts were starting to take root. I began to notice more. The way she'd dress up a bit more on certain days, the way she'd linger in front of the mirror longer than usual, the way she'd get texts late at night and reply with a smile that she tried to hide. There were other moments, too, things I didn't want to admit even to myself. The way she seemed more eager to spend time out with friends than with me. The nights she claimed she was too tired for sex but stayed up late scrolling through her phone or staring out the window. I found myself wondering, more often than I cared to admit, whether I was still the man she wanted to be with, or if someone else had caught her eye. I'd tell myself that it was just stress, that we were both working too hard, that the spark would come back. I even suggested we take a vacation, just the two of us, to get away from it all and reconnect. But she always had an excuse: too much work, not the right time, maybe later. And so the cracks continued to widen, while I kept trying to plaster over them with my denial. Then there was the night I saw it, an expression on her face as she read a text message, one of longing that she quickly masked when she realized I was watching. It was brief, just a flicker, but it was enough to make me feel like the ground beneath my feet was beginning to shift. I didn't want to confront it, didn't want to confront her. What if I was wrong? What if I was right? Either way, the thought of losing her, of losing what we had, was something I wasn't ready to face. So, I pushed it all down, burying my suspicions under layers of trust that had once been unshakable. But those cracks, they kept growing, until one day, everything shattered. And that day was closer than I could have ever imagined. It was a Friday evening, one of those quiet nights when I would typically unwind with a glass of whiskey and some old records, letting the stress of the week melt away. Sarah had mentioned she'd be late again, some work function or another. By then, I'd stopped asking too many questions, not because I didn't care, but because I was tired of the half-truths and the feeling that she was slipping further away from me with every evasive answer. The night wore on, and Sarah still hadn't come home. I was nursing my second drink when something inside me snapped, an impulse, a need to know, to finally confront what had been gnawing at me for months. I grabbed her laptop from the desk in our home office. She always kept it password protected, but I'd seen her type the password 100 times. My hands were shaking as I entered it, and I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Emails. That's where I started. I scrolled through her inbox, looking for anything that felt off. At first, it was just work emails, a flood of them, endless streams of projects and deadlines. But then I noticed a pattern. One email address that kept popping up, mixed in with the others, often with vague subjects like follow-up or next steps. I clicked on one. The email thread seemed innocent enough, work-related jargon that I didn't fully understand. But something made me keep reading, scrolling through replies, until I hit a part of the thread that had been forwarded from Sarah's personal email. That's when I saw it, a message that wasn't work-related at all. It was from a man named Alex. The tone was different, warmer, more personal. The more I read, the more the pieces started to fall into place. They were meeting outside of work, sharing jokes, stories, things that had nothing to do with their jobs. And then there were the little things that stood out. His compliments, the way he told her how beautiful she was, how much he looked forward to seeing her. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, but I kept reading, driven by some sick need to uncover the truth. I found more emails, buried deeper in her archives, messages that had gone from friendly to flirtatious to something far more intimate. He told her he couldn't stop thinking about her, that he wished he could hold her, kiss her, and she replied in kind, telling him how much she missed him when they were apart, how much she needed him. There was no denying it anymore. She was having an affair. My vision blurred with rage and hurt as I continued to dig. I found hotel reservations under her name, booked for nights when she'd told me she was working late. I found text messages that had been backed up to her email, snapshots of their exchanges that left no room for doubt. They were explicit, raw, in a way that made me feel sick to my stomach. She talked about their sex, about how he made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, disintegrating with every word I read. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room to smash it to pieces, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the truth laid bare in front of me. As I sat there, the weight of it all, were those words in the emails, those images in my mind of her with him. It was like a poison, spreading through me, making it impossible to feel anything other than rage and betrayal. "Please, Michael, just listen to me," she begged, her voice breaking. "It wasn't like that at first. We were just friends, but then things got complicated. I don't know how to explain it, but I never meant to hurt you." "Friends?" I spat the word out like it was something filthy. "Is that what you call it? Friends? Friends don't sneak around behind their spouses' backs. Friends don't book hotel rooms to fuck each other in. Friends don't lie every single day about where they're going and who they're with." She took a step back, her face crumpling under the weight of my words. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the way she was searching for something, anything, that might make me understand, that might somehow make this all okay. But there was nothing that could do that. Nothing that could make me understand how she could do this to us, to our marriage, to me. I had given her everything, my trust, my love, my life, and she had thrown it all away for someone else. "I never stopped loving you," she choked out, her hands clasped together as if she were praying. "Michael, I swear I never stopped loving you. This was a mistake, a horrible mistake, but it didn't mean I stopped caring about you." I let out a bitter laugh, one that sounded more like a growl. "A mistake? A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. This? This is a fucking betrayal, Sarah. You didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose him over me, over us." She was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking as she tried to keep it together, but I could see she was unraveling. Part of me felt a sick satisfaction in that, in seeing her break down the way I had, the moment I'd discovered the truth. But another part of me, a smaller, quieter part, felt nothing but emptiness. "What do you want me to say?" she whispered through her tears, her voice so small and broken that it almost didn't sound like her. "Tell me what to do, Michael. I'll do anything, just... Please, don't leave me. Don't give up on us." I stared at her, at the woman I had once loved more than anything in the world, the woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what I wanted. Part of me wanted to scream, to rage, to hurt her the way she had hurt me. But another part of me, the part that was still reeling from the shock of it all, just wanted to disappear, to wake up and find that this had all been some horrible nightmare. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was my life. Our life. And it had been torn apart in a matter of minutes. "Is he worth it?" I asked suddenly, my voice hard. Was he worth throwing everything away for? Did he make you feel that good, Sarah? Was he worth destroying our marriage? She shook her head frantically, her eyes wide with panic. No, it wasn't like that. I don't know what I was thinking. I was stupid, Michael. I was weak. It didn't mean anything, I swear. It was just a distraction. A distraction? I repeated, incredulous. That's all this was to you? A fucking distraction? She nodded, her hands trembling as she wiped at her tears. Yes. I don't know why I did it. I wasn't thinking. I was confused, and things got out of control. But I never stopped loving you. I never wanted to hurt you. Her words felt like knives, each one stabbing deeper into the wounds she had already inflicted. I wanted to believe her, to believe that this had all been some horrible mistake, that she still loved me, that we could somehow fix this. But the evidence was right there, staring me in the face, and I couldn't ignore it. I don't know if I can do this, I said finally, my voice shaking. I don't know if I can get past this, Sarah. How am I supposed to trust you again? How am I supposed to believe anything you say after this? She took a step closer to me, her eyes pleading. Please, Michael. I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll cut off all contact with him. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Just please, don't leave me. Don't give up on us. I looked at her, at the desperation in her eyes, the tears streaming down her face. This was the woman I had loved, the woman I had vowed to spend the rest of my life with. And now she was standing in front of me, broken and begging for forgiveness, for another chance. But could I give it to her? Could I find it in myself to forgive her, to try and rebuild the life she had shattered? I need time, I said finally, my voice hollow. I need to think. She nodded, more tears spilling over as she stepped back, giving me the space I needed. Take all the time you need, she whispered. Just, please don't shut me out. Please. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I turned and walked away, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions I couldn't even begin to untangle. I heard her sobbing quietly as I left, the sound following me down the hallway like a ghost. I needed to get out of there, to breathe, to think. But no matter where I went, no matter what I did, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. I left the house that night without knowing where I was going. I just needed to escape, to put distance between myself and everything that had just happened. My feet carried me down the empty streets, the cool night air biting at my skin, but I barely felt it. My mind was in turmoil, replaying everything I had seen, everything I had heard, over and over again, until it became a blur of pain and betrayal. I ended up at a bar, one of those dingy, out-of-the-way places that I used to frequent before Sarah came into my life. It was almost deserted, just a few regulars hunched over their drinks, lost in their own worlds. The bartender gave me a nod of recognition as I sat down at the bar, but I could see the question in his eyes. I hadn't been here in years, not since I'd met Sarah, and my life had taken a turn for the better. Or so I thought. "What'll it be?" he asked, his voice rough from years of inhaling smoke and whiskey fumes. "Whiskey," I said, my voice barely audible. "Keep them coming." He didn't ask any questions, just poured the drink and slid it across the bar to me. I downed it in one go, feeling the burn as it slid down my throat, but it didn't do much to numb the pain I was feeling. So I ordered another, and then another, each one doing a little more to dull the edges of the agony that was gnawing at my insides. As the alcohol started to take effect, my thoughts became hazier, but the anger and betrayal remained as sharp as ever. I kept thinking about Sarah, about the look in her eyes when she realized I knew. There had been guilt there, sure, but there was something else, too. Fear. She was terrified of losing me, of losing the life we had built together. But was that enough? I kept coming back to the same question. Was this something we could survive? Was there any way to rebuild what had been shattered? Or was this the end of us? The bartender poured me another drink, and I took it without thinking, barely noticing the way my hand shook as I brought it to my lips. I was lost in a fog of confusion and hurt, trying to make sense of a situation that seemed utterly senseless. I didn't know how long I sat there, drinking in silence, but eventually, someone slid onto the bar stool next to me. I glanced over, expecting to see one of the regulars, but it wasn't. It was a woman I recognized, though I couldn't quite place her at first. She was attractive, in a sharp, confident sort of way, with dark hair that framed her face and eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Rough night?" she asked, her voice low and sultry. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. There was something about her presence that unsettled me, something that made me feel even more on edge than I already was. "I'm Lisa," she said, offering me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I work with Sarah. We've met a couple of times at those awful office parties." And then it clicked. I remembered her now. One of Sarah's colleagues, the one who always seemed to be hanging around, watching, listening, but never really saying much. I'd never thought much of her before, but now, sitting next to her in this empty bar, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of unease. "Michael," I said, though I knew she already knew who I was. "Yeah, I know," she replied, her smile widening just a fraction. "I've heard a lot about you." That made me bristle, though I wasn't sure why. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She shrugged, taking a sip of her drink. "Just needed a night out. Rough day at the office, you know?" There was something about the way she said it, something in her tone, that made my skin crawl. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was an undercurrent of something in her words, something that set off alarm bells in my mind. But maybe it was just the alcohol, the confusion, the pain. I didn't know anymore. We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the low hum of the bar and the clink of glasses. I kept drinking, trying to drown out the thoughts that were swirling in my head, but Lisa didn't seem to be in any hurry to leave. In fact, she seemed perfectly content to sit there, watching me out of the corner of her eye, as if she were waiting for something. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke again. "So, I take it things aren't going so well with Sarah?" Her words hit me like a slap in the face, and I turned to glare at her, the anger bubbling up again. "That's none of your business," I snapped, though the truth was, I couldn't stop myself from answering. "But no, things aren't going well, not that it's any concern of yours." She didn't flinch at my tone, just nodded, as if she had expected that response. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, though there was something in her voice that made me doubt the sincerity of her words. "I always thought you two were a good match." "We were," I muttered, turning back to my drink. "We were." Lisa was silent for a moment, then she leaned in closer, lowering her voice as if she were sharing a secret. "You know, I've always thought Sarah was lucky to have you," she said softly. "You're a good man, Michael. Better than most." I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. The way she was looking at me, the way she was speaking, it was like she was playing some kind of game, a game I didn't know the rules to, but I wasn't in any state to figure it out. All I wanted was to forget, to numb the pain, and she seemed more than willing to help with that. "I don't know what's going on between you two," she continued, her hand brushing against mine on the bar. "But if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who understands, I'm here." There was something in her eyes, something predatory, and it sent a shiver down my spine. But the alcohol was dulling my senses, and I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't see past the fog of anger and betrayal that had settled over me. All I could see was the woman sitting next to me, offering a kind of solace that I wasn't sure I wanted, but maybe needed. I appreciate that, I said finally, though the words felt hollow, like they belonged to someone else. But I'm not sure talking is going to help. Maybe not, she said, her voice soft and almost hypnotic. But sometimes it helps to know you're not alone. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that made me uneasy. There was a hunger there, a desire that went beyond just comfort or friendship. It was a look I'd seen before, but never directed at me. And suddenly, I understood what she was offering, what she wanted. I should have gotten up and walked away. I should have left right then and there, gone home, and tried to sort out the mess that my life had become. But I didn't. I was too drunk, too hurt, too angry. And in that moment, the idea of finding some kind of escape, even a temporary one, was too tempting to resist. So I stayed. I let her buy me another drink. I let her talk, let her flirt, let her get closer. And I ignored the warning signs, ignored the little voice in the back of my head that was telling me this was a mistake, that this was only going to make everything worse. Because in that moment, I didn't care. All I wanted was to forget, to feel something other than the pain that was tearing me apart from the inside. And Lisa was more than willing to help me do that, no matter what the cost. Looking back, I wish I'd had the strength to walk away. I wish I'd had the clarity of mind to see what was really happening, to understand the consequences of the choices I was about to make. But I didn't. And what happened next was something that would change everything in ways I could never have imagined. The drinks kept coming, each one blurring the lines between right and wrong, between what I knew I should do and what I was about to do. Lisa's presence became more intoxicating, her words laced with a kind of seductive poison that seeped into my thoughts, numbing the pain just enough to make everything feel less real. It was late, or maybe it was early. I had lost track of time. The bar was emptier than before, just a few stragglers left nursing their final drinks. The bartender was wiping down the counter, barely paying attention to us, lost in his own world. But Lisa was focused entirely on me, her eyes never leaving mine, as if she could see the turmoil inside me and was waiting for the moment when I'd finally give in. "You don't deserve this, Michael," she said softly, her hand sliding over mine. Her touch was warm, almost comforting, but there was an intensity in it that I couldn't ignore. "You deserve someone who appreciates you, who sees you for the good man you are." Her words struck a chord, echoing the thoughts that had been swirling in my mind ever since I'd discovered Sarah's betrayal. I'd always been the one to put in the effort, to try and make things work. And for what? To be lied to? To be cheated on? The anger flared up again, fueled by the alcohol, clouding my judgment even more. "And who would that be?" I muttered, my voice thick with bitterness. "You?" She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, she smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "Maybe," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "If you'd let me." There it was, the offer laid bare. No pretense, no ambiguity. She was offering herself to me, offering a way out of the pain, even if just for a night. And in that moment it was tempting, so goddamn tempting. The thought of being with someone who actually wanted me, who made me feel wanted, was like a lifeline in the middle of a storm. But even as the thought crossed my mind, I felt a pang of guilt, a last vestige of the man I used to be, the man who loved his wife, who believed in the vows he had taken. But that man had been shattered by the betrayal, and what was left was someone who just wanted to feel something other than pain. I looked at Lisa, at the way she was leaning in closer, her breath warm against my skin, her lips just inches from mine. The alcohol buzzed in my veins, drowning out the voice of reason, the voice that was telling me to stop, to walk away. And then, without really thinking, I closed the distance between us and kissed her. It was a kiss born out of desperation, out of a need to escape, to find some kind of solace in the midst of the chaos. Her lips were soft, inviting, and she responded immediately, her arms wrapping around my neck, pulling me closer. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, more heated, as if we were both trying to lose ourselves in each other, to forget everything else. For a moment, I did forget. I forgot about Sarah, about the betrayal, about the pain. All that existed was the feel of Lisa's body pressed against mine, the taste of her lips, the way she made me feel wanted, needed. It was intoxicating, overwhelming, and I couldn't get enough. "Let's get out of here," she murmured against my lips, her voice breathless, filled with a desire that matched my own. "Come with me, Michael. Let's go somewhere. Private." Her words sent a jolt of anticipation through me, but they also brought a sliver of clarity, a brief moment of hesitation. What was I doing? Was this really the answer? Would this really make me feel better? Or was I just digging myself deeper into a hole I'd never be able to climb out of? But that hesitation was short-lived. The alcohol, the anger, the pain, it all drowned out the doubts, leaving only the need, the desire to forget, to feel something, anything other than the agony of betrayal. "Okay," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Let's go." She smiled again, that same knowing smile, and grabbed my hand, leading me out of the bar. The night air hit me like a cold slap to the face, but it wasn't enough to sober me up, to make me reconsider what I was about to do. I followed her down the street, my mind a blur, my body on autopilot. We didn't go far, just to a small, cheap hotel a few blocks away. The kind of place where people went when they didn't want to be seen, when they wanted to hide from the world. It was perfect for what we were about to do. The room was basic, nothing special. A bed, a chair, a bathroom. But none of that mattered. The moment we were inside, Lisa was on me again, her hands pulling at my shirt, her lips finding mine. It was frantic, desperate, as if we were both trying to escape something, trying to find some kind of release. I kissed her back, my hands moving over her body, feeling the warmth of her skin, the curve of her hips. It felt good, better than it should have, and I let myself get lost in it, in her. I pushed her back onto the bed, our bodies tangled together as we fell onto the mattress. Clothes were discarded, forgotten on the floor, as we lost ourselves in each other. Her skin was soft, her body warm and inviting, and for a moment, I didn't feel the pain, didn't feel the anger. All I felt was her, the way she moved against me, the way she made me feel like I wasn't alone, like I wasn't completely broken. Sex with Lisa was different, rougher, more primal, driven by a need that went beyond just physical desire. It was an escape, a way to forget, even if just for a little while. I didn't think about Sarah, didn't think about the consequences, didn't think about anything but the way Lisa's nails dug into my back, the way her breath hitched as we moved together, the way she moaned my name. For those moments, everything else disappeared. The world outside, the betrayal, the pain, it all faded away, leaving only the heat between us, the connection we were forging in that dark, dingy hotel room. But as the passion began to ebb, as the frenzy of our coupling slowed, reality started to seep back in. Lying there next to her, our bodies still tangled together, the guilt came crashing down on me like a tidal wave. What the hell had I done? This wasn't going to fix anything. It wasn't going to make the betrayal hurt any less, wasn't going to make the pain go away. If anything, it had just made everything worse. Lisa seemed to sense the shift in my mood. She reached out, her fingers trailing down my chest, but it didn't have the same effect it had before. Now, her touch felt wrong, a reminder of the line I had crossed, of the mistake I had just made. "Hey," she whispered, her voice soft, almost tender. "You okay?" "No," I said, my voice flat, devoid of any emotion. I'm not okay. She didn't say anything, just lay there beside me, her fingers still tracing patterns on my skin. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the guilt, the shame that was threatening to overwhelm me. But it was no use. I had done it. I had betrayed my own principles, my own beliefs, all in a futile attempt to escape the pain of Sarah's betrayal. And now, I was no better than she was.